Canada in the Rough, the hunting adventure documentary series. Brought to you by Excalibur Crossbow, Ontario Tourism, Federal Ammunition, Real Tree, and Camillus.
Well, this isn't your typical Canada in the Rough filming location. In fact, there's nothing typical about it. We usually save our out-of-country filming opportunities for really special stories, and that's what I think we've got in store for you today. Mainstream media in North America, and maybe even around the world, paints a really bad picture of Africa. They're either really misunderstood or they're intentionally misleading, and we've been duped by it. We used to think that we understood what Africa was all about until we met the Olofsey family. They opened our eyes to a whole new image, and we realized we needed to come here and learn about it for ourselves.
Yeah, we've always understood that hunters play a critical role in conservation on the North American continent and around the world. But it's a story in Africa that we're excited to learn for ourselves and to be part of and share. Governments around the world are trying to dictate what Africa should do with their animals, but it's hunting and it's conservation and people that live and thrive here that need these animals to be hunted to not only sustain the animals, but to stay in the areas and help everybody, help mankind enjoy this incredible piece of nature that we have behind us. This world is big and we're here to work with the animals and be part of it. And hunters are a critical role to that. That's a story we're excited to learn about and share with the world.
Absolutely. We look forward to it and hope you do too.
Closed captioning is brought to you by Camillus, quality knives since 1876.
The Olofsey family run the Mount Etcho Safari Lodge and the Jan Olofsey Hunting Safari. Both are located inside the Okanjati Game Reserve in Namibia, Africa. The Okanjati Game Reserve is an 80,000 acre environment. That's the equivalent of 32,000 city blocks. It is pristine, it is self-sustaining, where all types of African animals survive. Natural predator-prey relationships exist, and species are repopulating all on their own.
Jan Olofsey, a world-renowned conservationist who revolutionized the method used to humanely capture animals for relocation, started this dream back in 1975. With his wife Annetta, a Namibian farm girl and true animal lover, they built this facility through great trial and hardship, with the dream of always giving back to nature more than you take from it. Jan passed away in October of 2012. However, his dream lives on through the passion and dedication of Annetta, their son Alex, and his family.
Through the Olofsey family, we learned that Africa was no longer the wild and free land that it used to be, and wildlife species were actually struggling in countries where hunting wasn't allowed. Yet, wildlife populations were booming in countries where international hunting dollars were welcome.
We also learned that when the country of Namibia was struggling with decreasing wildlife populations, they turned the ownership of the wildlife over to the landowners. And once the landowners saw the value in the wildlife, the populations climbed.
These facts were completely new to us, and they weren't being shared by any mainstream news source in North America. In fact, we were so used to hearing about all these African species that are on the brink of extinction that it made it hard to know who was right and who was wrong.
The Ulofsey family now have over 8,000 animals and have literally recreated an African savanna. But to manage an undertaking so large requires significant resources. The demand for manpower is immense and has evolved into a village full of families that work at the Okanjati Game Reserve. The Ulofsey family also runs the Mount Echo Private School, which is presently providing a quality education for over 30 students.
They have literally established a thriving microeconomy centered around a thriving natural ecosystem. And this was only possible because Namibian officials had the wisdom to make the landowners also the gamekeepers. They've empowered the very people whose livelihoods, whose villages, whose entire existence depends on the survival of these animals. And they leave it up to them to ensure that they flourish. And flourish they have.
But as we all know, the happily ever after never comes without overcoming great adversity. Poaching is still a huge problem in Africa, with rhinos being a prime target. Led by Annetta's powerful motherly instincts, the Okanjati Game Reserve has been at the forefront of mitigating poaching losses by not only providing specialized anti-poaching training, but also providing a rescue and rehabilitation facility for rhino calves that are orphaned by poachers or any other cause.
The Mount Echo Rhino Orphanage received their first patient in 1995, a very feeble 7-day-old black rhino calf. Through great trial, Nazi grew into a healthy, strong black rhino and was released back into the wild, where she is now raising her 9th calf.
The Mount Echo Rhino Orphanage has raised and released 8 black and 5 white rhinos to date. We had the privilege of meeting 2 orphan rhinos that were almost ready to be released.
Actually, Jan's career started with preserving conservation, and that was by that he had developed the capture technique. The aim was to relieve them from the overpopulation and then feed the areas that have been depleted of wildlife. Our belief was that conservation has to pay for itself to conserve, and only if it generates finances from itself to conserve itself, it will be sustainable. And hunting is a very strong management tool in the whole chain of conservation because it generates good funds. It's selective hunting, so you take out the old animals that would have perished anyway, and you apply all those funds towards the herds and herds of animals that stay overall. And yet the hunter takes off very little.
Right.
The hunter takes off, to us, it is an important part because he takes off the old animal, which would have starved to death. It breaks my heart at the end of the season when I see the old animals die, and they could have do their last very good thing for their own species by rather having a hunter taking a quick shot at them. They wouldn't even know what happened, and they would have left revenue for their species. They would have still in their death, they would have still been a part
Saved many.
of. Yeah.
Because the truth of this really is, conservation can't happen without money. You can have the biggest heart in the world,
Yeah.
but if you don't have the funds to give them the milk or the hay or the land, it's impossible. So
It's
there has to be funds.
Yeah, and what is very important is a hunter can call himself a conservationist. But if you hunt with an outfit that doesn't apply those funds to conservation, the chain is broken. So we are the most important, we are the agents. When we use hunting as a management tool, it is our responsibility to put it back into conservation.
That's wonderful.
Wonderful message. We're talking about an incredible story, and it's big. Like, people watching this are just thinking we're sitting with 2 animals, letting us pet them. These 2 are unique because you have raised them since bottles, and they will soon be let out with all the rest. We're in a smaller area here. This isn't normal.
This isn't normal, and if I hadn't been there, if we hadn't saved them, they would have been dead. I mean, they would have been gone. But now We put them back into nature. They become part of their species. The oldest rhino that I raised, she's now 24. She's in calf with her 9th calf.
Wow.
That's the ultimate.
There's been all kinds of bans on trade of rhino parts. And I think the motive for it is good, is it not? They're trying to preserve the species.
And the ban on the trade of rhino horns is not working. The ban was brought in 1977. The numbers of black rhino plummeted with 95%. Thousands of rhinos have been
And
poached.
today, you guys pay for security
Yes.
to protect rhinos
Yes.
because the poaching
Yeah.
threat is still so big.
Yes, the rhino is probably the only species you can harvest the horn, use it sustainably, trade with it, bring in revenue, and the animal stays alive.
Yeah. Because you can take the horn off and not hurt the animal at all.
Exactly.
And it regrows, correct?
Exactly. If you go back, the crocodiles were hunted almost to, poached to almost to the brink of extinction. And there was a trade allowed in crocodile products, and suddenly the poaching left. There was no more threat to the crocodiles. The crocodiles in the wild are thriving. And yet there are crocodile farms that supply the market who want the crocodile products. The sad thing is the crocodile needs to get killed. The rhino you don't have to kill. You just take off the little piece on the horn. It goes into the market that wants to trade, and it's not like you cut off every rhino's horn.
Right.
There will be,
Just to fulfill the trade,
Yeah.
and they could be farmed for it.
yeah,
But if the governments would work with your renewable system
Yes.
or idea,
yes,
there's a chance that the poaching would end because the market could sustain the renewable and the rhinos live and thrive.
yeah. And the sad thing is we're coming back to governments deciding for us. We as Namibians have so many rhinos. Why can we not decide for our rhinos?
exactly.
The rest of the world has no rhinos, but they decide for us.
I know you don't want to get too political, but it is political. That's the unfortunate part. Rational, sound management decisions are not being made because of the impressions or the how it would be perceived by the public. And unfortunately, the public opinion is not always right.
Public opinion usually is people are not well informed. I would suggest people should inform themselves. And then also, when you walk the path, then you can start criticizing.
Exactly.
But until then, do your part by visiting it, by experiencing it, and leaving a dime for that there, which can be turned around to revenue to look after them, and then be part of that decision making.
While Paul and Keith Beasley were in Africa, they had the amazing opportunity to join in on a white rhino darting adventure. The Ulofsey family are darting their white rhinos to add them to the ROTUS database, which aims to record all rhinos in southern Africa. After the veterinarian darted a rhino, the group tracked it on foot, and eventually the 5,000-pound rhino succumbed to the drugs, and they got to work.
So the main thing we're doing is we're getting samples, horn samples, skin samples, hair samples. So we're doing DNA sampling, and it's called the ROTUS database. So there's a big database of all white rhino in southern Africa, and these guys aren't on that yet. So the main thing behind the database is if one should get poached, then you have traceability.
Help them at least in the investigation.
Yeah, exactly.
Which is incredible because, I mean, who else is putting this much effort into stopping poaching? From patrols to this kind of veterinarian work, I mean, it's an incredible amount of effort.
Yeah. No, it's a pricey amount of effort as well.
Yeah, I bet it is. Absolutely it is.
First, blood samples were taken. Then hair and skin samples were taken and recorded. After that, they drilled into the rhino's horns, which is a completely painless procedure for the animal, and inserted extremely small microchips and covered them with glue and sand.
So Alex, this is tremendous effort, as we've seen and talked about. From what I understand, I mean, this is largely funded by hunters' dollars, is it not?
At the moment, rhino don't really have a value because they're such a high risk to keep them because of poaching. So they don't generate money by themselves. You do have a little bit of tourism income, but on that, if you have 3 rhinos, you have the same income as if you have 30. So there really isn't any reason to keep more.
Sure.
So the only avenue that we really see to save the rhino in Africa is if they pay for themselves. And with the rhino being the only animal where you can have consumptive utilization without killing it, we feel that if the rhino horn trade is legalized, they can live their full lives, 30, 40 years, and every 3 years you'd harvest a bit of horn, and that would pay for the rhino's existence.
Is that what you mean by consumptive use?
Yes. So tourists are non-consumptive because they just look at the animal, and consumptive utilization is whenever you use something off of the animal. So either you shoot it for the meat, you shoot it for the trophy, for the hide. So with the rhino, you have consumptive utilization because you're using the horn, but it's the only animal you can consume without killing.
But just to boil this down, you're doing it because you love the animal. Secondly, with dollars for conservation to make sure it sustains us.
Exactly.
Because right now it doesn't make sense financially at all.
Yeah.
You get no help.
No.
No, if your only motive was business and dollars,
These wouldn't be here.
you wouldn't have these here.
Yeah, exactly.
There'd be no value. Or you'd have 1 or 2.
Yeah,
That's
exactly,
the message
because
most people watching this would have no clue.
Yeah, because at the moment they just cost you money.
Well, on behalf of humanity, thank you for what you and your mom and your family and your team do, because it's beautiful.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
It
Thank
really
you.
is. The effort is incredible.
After all the data was collected, the rhino was given a shot to wake back up, and it went off back into the Okanjati Game Reserve.
So yesterday we were lucky enough to have a leopard encounter. Absolutely incredible experience. Today we've come back and we found where he's got a springbuck. We can see the drag marks, and so we're actually going to go in and try to see if we can find him, because he had some kind of swelling in his face and his eye, and so they want to see if they can tranquilize him and give him some antibiotics and treat him for the whatever the infection might be. So we're just going to go in, follow the drag marks, and see if we can't locate this leopard with his kill. There's some hair right here. You can see where it brushed up against. You can see this big heavy drag mark all through here. It's winding off into that way. Oh, right here. There it is. Right through the grass. It's crouching down.
Luckily for Paul, he spotted the leopard before he got into the forest, where the leopard could have attacked him from behind. They called in the vet, and they were able to locate the leopard in the dense bush and get a dart into him. After giving time for the drug to take effect, they tracked him on foot. While the vet treated the infection and administered other medicines to boost overall health, Alex removed the collar that the leopard had grown too big for. While the origin of the collar is unknown, it was most likely part of a study.
I've enjoyed many great adventures across the world throughout my life, and this I think might go down as one of my favorites, and it doesn't involve killing at all.
Wonderful. And it's like you see a leopard out in the wild, like very rare. I mean, we live for 40 years in the bush, and we can count on our fingers how many times we see him. So seeing him is like 1 in a million. Then being able the next or the second day after to again see him and to tranquilize him and to treat him is like 1 in a 5. You know, so it's so beautiful, this moment, because it is absolutely special.
Isn't it a testament to the fact that this leopard showed up in an area where people cared enough to be able to notice his condition, to put the effort into tracking him and following him, calling in a vet, right? Yeah. I mean, not everywhere in Namibia would take this kind of care, I'm gonna guess. Is that true?
Yeah.
A lot of places you would have just been shot because he's a leopard.
Right.
Not just...
And this is not because we gain anything from it.
No, you're not gonna hunt this animal.
Purely conservation.
This is a love for these wildlife and for these animals.
And he may go miles and miles away again, but to us, we helped him. And
absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, Annetta, you are a wonderful person, a wonderful individual. I hope that your facility can continue to thrive and do what it needs to, because you're giving so much back. And that's, I mean, we all want to, but it's wonderful to see just how successful you've done it.
Thank you so much.
To ensure that the leopard doesn't become aggressive towards the crew when he awakes, he is given a half dose of the antidote so that he wakes very slowly and feels drunken.
In national parks, animals are managed and funded by the government. But on private land, which makes up the majority of lands in Namibia, the only way for wild animals to survive is if the locals see the value in having them. If land isn't turned into game reserves like the Ulofsis have done, it will undoubtedly be used for cattle ranching. And on ranches, wildlife are seen as competition to the cattle and will be removed.
The facts are clear. If animals pay for themselves, then they will flourish. That's as true in all continents of the world as it is in Africa. And it's simply because humans will protect something that is of value to them.
Discussions about hunting and Africa almost always end up with someone suggesting that instead of hunting safaris, why not just have photo safaris?
At Mount Etcho Safaris, it takes 72 photo tourists to equal the same revenue of just one hunter. If you look at the energy used, the waste that's created, the vehicles required, the international air travel, and the overall carbon footprint of 72 tourists compared to one hunter, it's easy to see that hunting produces the greatest conservation results with the least impact on the environment.
While photo safaris are not a strong enough model to save Africa's wildlife from dwindling on their own, they are still very important. The most successful wildlife management programs need phototourism revenue, they need hunting revenue, they need breeding and livestock revenue, and they need meat sale revenue. Not one of these programs will be enough to support the demands of wildlife conservation on their own. But together, we see from the example shown by the Ulofsi family that species can be preserved and enlarged and enjoyed.
So please, take the time to learn for yourself. Go visit Mount Etcho Safaris and help us share the message that despite the good intentions of many people throughout the world, short-sighted laws and misguided opinions are actually hurting wildlife populations, and that decisions regarding African wildlife need to be left to African officials.
And last, but certainly not least, hunting is an integral part of conservation, because hunting creates value for wildlife by harvesting a very small percentage of older animals that can still be utilized for meat and trophy, and at the same time generate enough revenue to conserve and protect the rest of the herd.
We're your hosts, Paul and Keith Beasley from Canada in the Rough. We hope that you'll do your part to preserve and to protect wildlife populations around the world, and be proud of your hunting heritage.